We'll see what happens. My name is Allison Campbell. I'm the Heritage Outreach Manager for the Washington State Historical Society. And thank you all for being here today. Another one of our common concerns programs, this time taking a look at online fundraising. And if you'll recall, we did a session on online fundraising 5 months ago, maybe. And it's a whole new world now. And back 5 months ago, I really couldn't find too many folks who had much experience with online fundraising. And now I had all of these wonderful museum people to choose from who had recently run fundraisers. So we're so delighted to have our presenters here and all of you. Just a reminder about some of the housekeeping with our Zoom. If you could please keep your, if you're an attendee, keep your microphone muted. You can have your camera on or off. I mean, I like to see your faces and your pets and stuff, but if you prefer to have it off, that's just fine too. Please share ideas, ask questions in the chat box. You know, these are for folks who I just happen to know had some experience with this topic, but I also know there's lots of you out there in the audience who have also run online fundraisers or have seen things that other people have done and gotten good ideas. So none of us here are experts. Hopefully you've gathered that over the course of these programs that we're all kind of learning together. And so if you have things you want to share or specific questions you want to ask, throw them in the chat. If none of us can answer them, then I'll go and find some answers after we're done here and email those resources out to you all. I'll kind of facilitate that chat once our presenters have each had a chance to speak a little bit. So, you know, don't wait till the end to put those questions in there. Drop them in as soon as you think of it. I am going to record this session. As I said, I already hit record. I'll share it on our Facebook Heritage Outreach group and to that YouTube channel, just so that there's a place to go and find these. If you want to share them with colleagues, that's just fine. I'll also send an email out probably tomorrow with any links that were discussed here today, anything that comes up today that I can kind of put together in a package and direct you specifically to those resources. I'll do that. So I was thinking that we would go, we have 4 presenters here today. Each of them will talk for, you know, 5 to 10 minutes, maybe a few minutes more, and then we'll wrap up with questions. And all 4 of these folks have held online fundraisers since the pandemic started, since we all closed our museums. And we're going to kind of go through them in the order of the calendar order of when they had to kind of pivot their fundraising. And so with that in mind, we're actually going to start with Melanie Mason, who's the development director at the Center for Wooden Boats in Seattle. And they did a speedy pivot in the early days. So I'm going to mute myself and invite Melanie to share with you a little bit about their experience.
Hello. Our fundraiser was originally scheduled for April 4th. And in early March, it was pretty clear that that was probably not going to happen based on what was going on in the world. So we sent out an announcement 1 month before our event saying we were going to postpone it to June, still have an in-person event. And then when everything shut down in mid-March, we were like, that's not going to happen either. So many of our constituents are of an older demographic, high risk, and we did not want to risk them, or you know, we didn't want to plan something that would A, risk them, and B, just people would probably not show up. It would be a waste of the extreme expense that can come with having in-person dinners and so forth, renting a venue. So after initially announcing that we were moving it to June, we then decided after lockdown that we were going to have it in person. And we wanted to do it really fast because since everyone was locked inside, we figured, you know, this is our very first online fundraiser. We don't know what attendance is going to look like, but if we hold this while people are still shut indoors, looking for something to do, then we might actually be successful at this first time stab at online fundraising. So we turned our event around in the space of about 2 weeks, like put together a whole campaign and promoting it and and executing it. And so some changes that we made to go to a virtual format. Um, I mean, so, well, first of all, one of the pluses of going to a virtual format is that without having to pay for a venue and catering, we didn't have to charge the ticket price that might normally be something that keeps people from attending, the people of more modest income. So we were able to make the entire thing free to attend, which meant more people could potentially be a part of it and donate. Um, and of course, that lowered our expenses, not having to pay for the venue and the catering. And that became a huge factor in the success of it. We set our sights pretty low because it was a first attempt at online fundraising. We we expected to bring in we hoped to bring in maybe 60% of what we would in a normal year. We ended up bringing in only a little bit less than in a normal year. However, because our expenses were so low, our net was actually 23% over a normal year, which was very unexpected and a huge win for us. And I think that even in a normal, if we end up going back, if the world, coronavirus is, there's a vaccine and everything goes back to normal, I think we would still keep some components of what we did this time because it worked so well. So some pivots we made between like say last year's event and this year's event is that normally for an in-person event, it's a one evening, it's a silent auction in person, and then a dinner and a raise the paddle component. So instead of having it all happen in one night, we made it a week-long thing. So we put all of our auction items online and sent out the link to our, everyone on our Facebook, our Instagram, our email list, our members, our monthly e-newsletter. Links to this went out, and so people had all week to browse the items and place their bids. And there were some of the higher dollar items. We made them premier packages that closed a little bit early. That created kind of a sense of urgency. Like if you want this, you have to bid by this time. And then there was this last minute rush that was in response to that sort of sense of urgency, which raised that, just that last minute rush raised 40K in about 2 hours. So that worked really well. Something that I thought was super successful was this social media sort of tack that we took. Our outreach person created these events that people could look forward to every day at noon. So one day, one of our board members showed people how to smoke salmon. Another day, our executive director took you on a tour, a virtual tour of our historic wooden boats. Another day, we had a sea shanty sing-along with one of our staff members that has learned a ton of sea shanties on tall ships. And so we had something every single day to look forward to, and the breadth of it was very interesting. So if maybe you're not into boats as much as woodworking, well, there was a day where you learned how to do some woodworking with our boat ride on staff. And maybe you're more interested in the party aspect. There was the day before our big showdown, one of our board members did a little cocktail making lesson in advance of the sort of cocktail event where the premier items would be closed and we find out who the winners are, and tried to create a party atmosphere around the sort of close of the week, in which people could see each other online, have that sense of not just watching a static presentation, but getting to interact with each other, sort of like we are right now. And that sort of, to the best of our ability, was how we could recreate the gathering experience. And that seemed to go really well. So in order to have a raise the paddle without being in the same room, people physically holding that up, we used the chat feature on Zoom. And the great thing about that is that you don't have to worry if you misheard something or whatever. People put it in the chat, and then there's someone behind the scenes, which was me, taking note of who's pledging how much, because I'm going to get in touch with all those people after the call, and we could save that chat. So if we want to go back and double check ourselves, make sure we didn't miss anyone, like someone actually raising their hand, but there's so many people on the call, you might miss it. The chat feature enabled us to really be sure that we didn't overlook anyone, and allow me to get back in touch with them. So yeah, social media and email was a huge driver of our event, especially, I mean, some of our, sea shanty sing-alongs and that sort of thing, like they got 4,000 views. And another plus of us holding this online was that people could attend from all over the country. Like, not only was there no barrier to attendance from price, but there's no barrier to attendance by location. So we have people donating from Maine, which is a big boat building community, from all over the Eastern Seaboard that normally would never be there. So we felt like it helped with sort of equity of everyone being able to attend. There were there's a wide price points of items, and also raise the paddle. I mean, you could donate $5 if you wanted to, and even if you donated nothing, you could still be engaged and part of the community experience, which is what, as an organization, we're about. And so it was really nice to be able to bring that to our first virtual fundraiser.
That is awesome. Any other tidbits you want to drop? You guys seem like well, what I would say is so much of this, I'm sure for all of us, has been going on instinct and gut, right? Because none of us have done any of this before. And it sounds like you guys had some really good instincts right out the gate about spreading the event out and making it sort of inclusive. Yeah, what else were you going to share?
I was going to say, and this might not be as big of a deal now, but because Zoom was so new and a lot of our communities, especially older people that may not be in the workforce, may not be familiar with it, we did a how-to video that was posted in advance so that people that wanted to attend the Raise the Paddle Zoom room, if they had never done it before, they had some resource like walking them through the steps. And then we also had, prior to that Saturday night virtual party, we had someone providing tech support that you could call if you couldn't figure out how to get on, and walk people through that. So I think that was really helpful, because when we held this fundraiser, which was in late April, it was such a new thing that we couldn't expect everyone to know all the ropes.
Yeah,
so I would recommend
some of
that,
us are still learning the ropes.
Yes. So especially if your demographic's older, I would really suggest having a resource like that for anyone that needs it.
If folks go to the Center for Wooden Boats Facebook page, is the event kind of archived? If you go to older events, can they see some of these materials?
Yeah, I can show you. I can put in the chat, I'll put the link to the sort of recap of the event. And you can also watch some videos of highlights. So you can see some of the social media posts that we did, and the videos, the noon events that happened every day, some highlights from those, so you can get a sense of how that content engaged our audience, and how it sort of wrapped up the sort of spectrum of what we do in sort of one succinct package.
And it also sounds like it really kind of built anticipation that sort of towards the big event, which I think is a really great way to use social media, and something to kind of think about how do you kind of craft this whole experience that culminates in obviously the giving of lots of money. So
for sure, yeah. I mean, people that normally wouldn't come to something where they're just like, oh, I'm just going to be asked for money, but I do want to see X, Y, Z, and then they might, be inspired to be generous.
Yeah.
Help us out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Melanie. And I'm sure folks will have some questions too and be interested in looking up some of those resources. So I want to invite Marianne, who's from the Poulsbo Historical Museum, to share with you guys a little bit. And she was very funny. So their fundraiser was back in June. And when I invited her, because I was following along with their fundraiser and, the social media and stuff, and I invited her to come and just share a little bit about what they experienced. And she said, well, I still have more questions than I have answers. And I said, that's okay, because probably whatever questions you have, other people have. And it's, if nothing else, it's comforting to know that we all are kind of in the same boat, if you will. So I'm going to mute myself and invite Mary Ann to share with y'all a little bit.
So I was just sitting here with my mouth just hanging open, listening to Melanie. It's like, oh my goodness, that is so awesome. Well, I want to be just like you when I grow up. I mean, this is just so cool. Okay, so a little background on the Historical Society. We have been I think my entire life with the Historical Society, we've been in a capital campaign. And so that's life as I've known it. And so at the beginning of this year, thank goodness, we paid off our building. But we went into this discovering we needed to raise money for operating funds, and we had no idea how to do that. And to tell you the truth, we're still trying to figure that out. So I'm going to learn a ton from you all today. Another little bit of background is that we're almost all volunteers. I'm a volunteer. I'm kind of holding the place for when COVID is over, and we'll go try and get a grant that will allow us to get a real executive director. But in the meantime, I'm having a lot of fun. Okay, so Allison had said something about, just to give some details, the platform that we've used in the past, we just went with it, which was Auction Tracker, which is now Max Giving. And so we stayed with that. We have volunteers, myself included. We know how to enter in auction items. We know how to enter in when people buy tickets, things like that. Things like that. I'm sorry? Are you getting feedback?
You were getting, but now we can hear you just fine. You're good.
Okay. All right. So at any rate, we use largely volunteers for this. As we went with Max Giving. We talked to some other organizations who had used them as they were moving to online auctions, and everybody said, yeah, it's working okay. Of course, all of us have no idea what we're doing, but we did it anyway. And let me see if I can arrow down here. Okay, so I did say before we started that June, when we had our auction, now seems like just 100 years ago. And you know, we're all comfortable with Zoom now. I like what Melanie did in terms of preparing her audience for it. We know how to use videos. We can use Vimeos. Our content is richer because we've actually functioned during COVID, and we know how a little bit better to sell that. But those are just some of the things that have happened between June and today. What we did right, even back then, is again, we have amazing volunteers who collect the items. They solicit the items, they collect them, they stage them. We found in our midst a volunteer who's an amazing photographer, which is key to getting your items on the auction website. They've got to look good. And so we did have a photographer step up who could do that for us. We got most of the items entered into the system in a timely manner, consistent as we are. Some of them got in at the last minute, but that's kind of normal for us. And something that I thought that we did really well was that as donations came in every day, we were thanking donors. And that's just something that's really important to me. And we did that, and I participated in that part, and that was part of my favorite stuff to do. Okay, I don't know why. Okay, so what else I want to tell you? Okay, so background, raise the paddle. Okay, so our raise the paddle did not go as well as it had in the past, and a lot of it, again, I think I see now, you know, we didn't have the atmosphere, we didn't have the tradition, but we didn't have, we had lost our purpose in terms of raise a paddle, and we had not learned how to articulate the new one. But I'm learning from Melanie how to go live with the raise a paddle. So I'll just point that out to you, that we did not go live with it. So for those of you who are doing online auctions, I would like to point out that to just have the raise a paddle as an option on your auction website is good, but it's not the end all. You need to have some other techniques in place, some other strategies besides just having a place to donate on the auction website itself. Um, we do have some fundraising consultants who have amazingly gotten us through this capital campaign and buying, paying off museums in a few years. Wow, how cool is that? And they did step up and help us with some of the technology, but we also had some volunteers who did. So if you're a small organization like we are, I would encourage you as you're going into this to be sure that you designate who are the people that are going to be in touch with your auction platform people, because we were bumping into each other. And that would be something that I would just say was a lesson learned from this. Let's see, what else? Something else I learned from it is I would have us do more Zoom live events. We did one at the evening on the last day, like Melanie, we had it up for a week, but looking back, I would definitely do more events throughout the week. Yeah, and then the other thing that I think that I would do differently, we went with social media, we did our MailChimps, we did, we checked all the boxes that we thought we needed to in terms of technology and social media, but we forgot or we neglected picking up the phone, texting each other, and some of the personal connections. We did go to some of our older donors and say, if you'd rather write a check, we'll come pick it up for you. If you're having trouble, figuring out how to log in, I can stop and social distance with you and help you with that. But even then, I still think we missed some of the personal connection. So again, I would say to do the Zooms, but I would also say that, the emails, the phone calls, the texting, I think is something that we have to never let go of. That would be a learning lesson from us. The other thing is that I think that for those of you that are doing campaigns in the fall, that you have some COVID battle stories to tell, right? You can tell the successes, you can show how you're engaging the community, you can tell how you've reached out to new constituencies, that you are serving people all over the country, and that you are getting feedback locally, and that these are just wonderful stories. So don't forget to tell them. Let's see what else. My recommendations, and it was because we're going to be looking at our fall campaign. So these are the recommendations for ourselves that I would share with you as well. Keeping the clear lines of communication open, having good photography, having a compelling case, and having the leaders who will enhance your message by making the phone calls, doing the texting, so that people understand that this is still as personal as it was when you stand up and walk over and talk to somebody and have a glass of wine at the dinner auction. We can still have that kind of a relationship, but in a different venue. So how am I doing? Am I doing time-wise okay?
That was great. I probably wrap you up and just say,
Yes.
what would we do without our volunteers? Oh my gosh. And, I know that we all know this, that I've been doing this census for the last 6 months and trying to get a good snapshot of the heritage kind of sector here in the state. And 66% of the 200 plus organizations that I surveyed are all volunteer run, have no paid staff. So the things that you all can do, and Marianne, you're such a wonderful example of just the energy and the passion. It's really amazing. And you hit on my favorite theme that has come out of this whole Common Concerns series. It's just be brave, right? You just have to kind of give it a try. And people are being gracious right now with us as we all try new things. So good job. I'm going to send it over to Brianna Kosowitz, who's up at the Bainbridge Island Historical Museum, and they held their fundraiser in September, which even that feels like a lifetime ago. And so let's hear a little bit from her.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brianna. It's good to see you all. I'm so glad we're having this get together. I have been knee deep in analyzing our fundraiser. Since this was a first for us, I think it's really important. We're putting a lot of energy into analyzing how it went so that we can do a second one next year is what it's looking like, and do it better and kind of take the tools and the lessons learned. So yeah, I just applaud everybody for putting yourselves out there. We started planning this kind of at the beginning of COVID. We had a gala event that we were planning in October, and for our historical museum, that gala was new. So we had only done it 1 year, so we didn't have a ton of, like, we were excited to have the gala in person for the second year to apply lessons learned for that. So then to kind of divert and shake it all up, we didn't have like a really core audience for the gala established yet, since we had only had 1 year. So it was, again, just kind of starting from scratch. I think for the planning team, what was really challenging was there were so many ideas, and that was awesome, but it was difficult to say no and to really streamline our event, because it was feeling very scatterbrained and like we were trying to do too many things. So we ultimately ended up deciding on a 5-day virtual campaign that was called Hats Off to History. And each day had a different decade. So it was grounded in a different decade of Bainbridge history. And it showcased a different element of our mission. So something different that we did. And the way we structured it to do it in really 2 months with our team was we divided our board and staff into teams each day, and we gave them guidelines of what they needed to create, and we let them go for it. And then they came back to the planning team and they would deliver what they created, and then we would fix it up and get it all set up to go out. So each day had a video, which was between 3 to 10 minutes, that featured the decade and the theme. And then we had a daily recipe, a daily playlist, volunteer spotlights every day, a quote of the day, and some fun oral histories. So it was kind of like catch-all fun things that you could look forward to in each decade. And it was all hosted on an event website. And I think I mentioned this, but it was just a call for donations. So we didn't do an auction. We didn't do any live events. It was strictly treated it kind of like an annual appeal, but it was virtual, and it was it was just a call for donation support. What we did before we launched the event was we actually kind of had individual conversations with our core group of stakeholders. We call them our friends of the museum. And we got them to buy into our idea and to make their donations ahead of time to create a pot of money that we used for matching funds. So we raised $25,000 in advance of the virtual fundraiser, and that was used as a carrot to get everybody else to donate. And I think that worked really well. It empowered our friends of the museum to feel like they were a part of the planning process. And whereas we might have asked them to host a table or to do something else for our in-person gala, they still were a part of that planning process without actually creating any of the content. And it gave them some skin in the game to then help us advocate and share out our message and forward our emails and help with what Marianne was talking about, that personal recruitment of donors, basically. So that worked really well. And it also worked well to have our board members helping on these teams for each day. I was a little hesitant because getting the board too involved with the day-to-day operations can be kind of tricky for an organization our size. But it worked well because, again, they felt more invested in what was happening. So when it was their day and their video, it was easier for them to make an entree to their friends and their network and share their video and kind of say like, hey, this is something I care about. And if you want to see me talking about whatever part of history, tune in. So there were daily emails and then Facebook campaigns that went along with it. And I'll put the website to our event in the chat, and it's still live. So you can go and check it out and kind of get a sense of how it came together. We did exceed our goal, but again, because we did have the one in-person gala, we didn't really have a bar set. So we just sort of went on our gut to set the goal. We were really hoping to make it, and we did exceed it, which was great. But I think we learned a lot in the process. As I'm looking at the results of how many people tuned in, how many minutes of every video did they watch, how many, emails were opened. The amount of effort we put into creating new content did not, to me, it did not like really show in the engagement that and views and shares and things that I saw when I'm looking at the data. I think people were impressed with how much we did, but I don't know if that really was why they gave. So we're going to be sending out a survey to our donors to say like, hey, this was our first year. Can you tell us why you gave and what motivated you to support the museum? Because I have a feeling that we could do a lot less new content and still get the same kind of support around our mission. So that's kind of a takeaway for us. And I'll just say also, like, it was a lot of logistics. I mean, I had to become a video editor overnight and created all those videos. And I created a pop-up website with one volunteer. And then I was responsible for all of the troubleshooting. And as you know, like things that come up. And what that meant was like my time as the executive director was taken away from having those personal communications with our top donors. So it was almost like an afterthought to come up with that strategy to send individual emails and to make phone calls. And it was kind of rushed. Whereas I felt like if I could have been less involved with the logistics, then maybe my time might have been better used steering the communications with our donors. That was a big lesson learned for sure. I think I'm probably almost out of time, but it was interesting to analyze the types of donors. So we saw that we had 40 out of 160 were brand new donors to the museum through this virtual campaign. So that was really encouraging. But then when you looked at the gala from last year, only about 27% of attendees actually donated to this virtual campaign. So we didn't do a very good job of keeping the donors who spent a lot of money at our gala last year and compelling them to give virtually. And that was, you know, it's concerning, but I think it's something that we just, with more time to plan, maybe we can improve on that. So that's pretty much what I have to say.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Brianna. You raise a really good point. Just the kind of blessing and the curse of all the data that comes with kind of these digital virtual spaces that we're all living in now. And you wouldn't necessarily have all of those numbers if you were doing an in-person, you know, person event. But as you start to do that cost benefit analysis, you know, does what we brought in justify what we put into this event? That's really, really interesting. And the data of carrying over the donors from last year. Well, that's a great sort of other model, right? No online auction. Were people just directed to your giving page on your website?
Yeah, and so we had a donate form on our website, and then also one thing that we did was on all of our Facebook posts, we added a donate button. And I'm fairly convinced that a lot of those people would not have actually clicked on the link to go to our website to then go to the donate page. So to make it really easy and let them donate on your Facebook page, we got like, I think it was like $2,000 or something on Facebook, but it's easier for people my age. Like I do that too. I'm like, oh, my friend's doing this, I'll donate 15, 30 bucks or whatever. And then you see it kind of add up. But I was going to say one other thing too that you mentioned. I forget. But anyways, go check out our website. Someone asked a question in the chat about like response rate, and I'm happy to share out to an amended version of my engagement analysis. I broke down like the Vimeo views and the social media likes and shares and exposure, and then of course MailChimp too. And I don't know what your email size list is, but for us, we have like 700 people on our email list, and we never had more than 300 people read our emails in a day. So that was kind of, I mean, I don't know, it's a limitation for sure. And also looking at the people who donated to both last year's gala and this year's, you know, virtual event, I would have thought because of COVID, people would be donating more this year because of that emergency kind of save the nonprofit mentality. But people spent way more at the gala last year than they did, you know, virtually. And I think there's a lot to be said for the in-person alcohol-induced bidding that goes on, and people probably feel regretful afterward, like, oh, I shouldn't have spent that much, because you could see that they really weren't spending as much on the virtual campaign.
Yeah, there's not like although, and we're gonna hear from Stephanie in a minute, at her auction, my friends and I were goading each other by text to so we got a little, I'm sure we all had a glass of wine in our hands in our own houses. But no, you're right, that kind of energy, it's hard to replicate that in a virtual space for sure. Well, thank you for being so transparent with sort of all of your big takeaways. And it sounds like it was a success, and whether or not you determine it was worth all the effort in the end, or the same kind or maybe different kinds of effort next time. Cool. Thanks, Brianna. So the last person I invited to just share a little bit is one of my museum heroes, Stephanie Lyle. She's the director at the Harbor History Museum in Gig Harbor. And they also, I think you guys had your fundraisers just a week or two apart. So take it away, Steph.
Okay, well, the fundraiser that we do is called History Rocks, and we've been doing it for 19 years. But this is the about 47th version of what we put together for that year, because for this year, because we started this was our 10th year in our new building, and like Paulsbo, you know, they had raised all this money to build this wonderful building, but there's really virtually no endowment to cover operating. So literally every year we're on a hamster wheel to raise all this money. And our board is just so invested in this gala event that we do that they just can't stand not doing it. So we had planned actually this huge thing for our 10th anniversary to invite people to our site, because we don't have enough room to do a big sit down event at the museum itself. So we've had to go off site. And what we found is that a lot of our donors are not familiar with the museum. They come because their friends drag them to a table or whatever. And, you know, they have a few drinks and they're having fun and it's a fun party. And so they give some money, but they don't really know what the museum does, or they've never been here. And so we thought this is a great opportunity to do this big open house and have everybody down. And we're also in the middle of a $2 million capital campaign to finish our maritime gallery. And so it's like, okay, so we'll do this big event. We'll promote the maritime gallery. It's going to be awesome. And then bam, COVID hits. And our committee was so committed to still trying to do something in person that we went through numerous machinations of this. So we went from, okay, so maybe we can't have a big gathering, we can't have an open house, but, and we had booked this band, which was very expensive because it's a historical band, but it's Junior Cadillac, and they come from all over the place, including Mexico, to perform. And so we had done this special booking of this band. We had booked our caterer, done the whole thing. And so when COVID hit, I thought, well, okay, here's an idea. We're right here on the harbor in Gig Harbor. Let's just do a huge concert on a boat in the middle of the harbor and have everybody enjoy the music. It'll be great. So I'm emailing back and forth. The band's on board with that. But then trying to find a boat that would work, that had enough power, was another challenge. Because they had to have a lot of power for instruments and speakers and acoustics and all that. So we're in this whole process of trying to find a boat. And then the band guy gets back to me and says, well, we need to be 6 feet apart because we don't live with each other. We don't see each other all the time. So the band members have to be 6 feet apart. So you do the math and it's like, okay, now I need like a football field and a boat's not that big. So that whole thing just kind of went out the window. Our committee was kind of forced to say, okay, we're going to have to embrace this online thing, but we all don't even know what that is. So luckily I have an amazing staff here that really picked up the ball and ran with it. And like Center for Wooden Boats, we use Greater Giving, and we had transitioned to that software this year intentionally for the in-person event, but then they have this module for the online auction that we bought as well. And so in the end, it actually worked out fine. We were also lucky because we contacted the auctioneer that is a local guy that does the auctioneering for us pretty much every year. And I knew that we were going to do this special 10th anniversary event. And I had booked him the year before. And when we circled back with him 6 months before the event, he's like, oh no, I'm already booked. I'm like, yeah, you're booked with us. He says, no, I'm booked with another organization and I don't do virtual stuff. So I'm like, okay, that's great. So now what do we do? So then I contacted an old friend of mine who's an auctioneer who also did Center for Wooden Boats, Nelson J. And luckily he has adapted his whole auctioneering company to be able to handle these virtual events. And between Nelson and the gal from Greater Giving and a couple people that Nelson connected us with, we were able to do some video, pre-event video things. We figured out the show flow of the quote live event and pre-taped a number of things. And then the guy in Wenatchee was doing all the live versions of that. So anyway, but to make a long story short, it was definitely a change. The upshot of it was that we're sure that we will use that style again, even if it's a hybrid event, because we found that so many people had such a good time. Just, they'd get the text that somebody had outbid them or whatever, and they're playing it up. And so you can use that in a live setting just as easily as you can in a virtual setting. So, we will definitely use that system again. I think probably one of our biggest challenges was also procurement. I don't know if other folks faced that, but procurement has always been a huge challenge. But we didn't feel because of COVID that we could do our typical stuff in terms of sending out all the letters and asking people to donate. And a lot of the small businesses that typically support the event in Gig Harbor were closed or strapped or whatever. So it just didn't seem like it was necessarily right to be able to do that. So we had some people on the committee that were generous enough to donate some large what we call like local or drivable adventures. So that was nice. And then we got creative, and we put together mystery boxes from our museum store, and that were full of fun things. And so I think all in all, and then we also put a call out to our whole email list to see if anyone was interested in donating certain items. And we got some interesting things, not what you might expect, but we did get a couple of heirloom quilts, and we got a very interesting cradle. We got what we called Scary Doll. But the Scary Doll went to someone who actually restores dolls and was totally pumped about it. So it's like, okay, you just never know. So anyway, I think that all that stuff is always interesting to consider. And then looking at some of the higher end items that we could do. We talked about doing a raffle, and found out that you couldn't sell raffle tickets online by Washington State. Even with COVID, they weren't allowing it. So we also found that you could only sell alcohol on the quote day of the event. And so we had to time certain openings of certain items. So like all the alcohol packages only opened on the last day. And then we also had a function that was a buy it now function on the online software. And we didn't realize that it automatically calculated and it launched everything all at once. So we got a surprise on launch day where we had a couple of the like vacation packages that the buy it now price was so low in comparison to what people typically would pay for it, that we lost one of them. But it also in another way maybe motivated people to be more aggressive about their early bidding. So the first day was interesting because we had that buy it now function. The second day we closed that at 1 o'clock. We sent out an email and a text through the system to say, we're closing the buy it now option now. So if there's anything you want to grab, do it now. And then we just went to normal bidding for the rest of the event. And then on the last day, we only did this for 3 days because my personal take, we were also competing with, I think, 3 other online auctions in the area at the same time, some of which were going a lot longer than ours. Some were, averaging about a week. And I said, personally, when I've been involved, I get lost. I go in there and I'm like, oh, this is cool. But then by the end of the thing, I'm kind of lost and I don't go back to it and I don't bid again. So I wanted to compress this down into 3 days so that we kind of compelled people to get involved sooner and stay with us. And so the last day, had this quote live event. And I had sort of thrown the gauntlet down and said, well, if we make $100,000, I'll jump in the bay. And totally stealing that from Center for Wooden Boats again. But thank you for the inspiration. And I didn't think we would do that, but then just sort of just before the event launched, we actually got word that we had received the Saving America's Treasures grant from the National Park Service for Shenandoah project. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm jumping in the bay because $100,000 is $100,000, right? So, so anyway, that was pretty fun. So we ended the thing with me jumping in the bay, and then just encourage people to participate however they could. And so we've actually had some trickle in after the event with people sending in checks for Raise the Paddles that they're like, we don't give money online. We don't trust the internet or the interwebs, you know? And so they'll send a check, which is fine because then we don't have fees. You know, it's just all stuff that you have to kind of gauge in terms of your audience and who's your supporter. And I'm really curious now to take Brianna's lead and go back and really do some more evaluation. I've started it, but I got swamped with some other stuff. And it's just interesting to sort of see who typically gives at the gala versus who gives online. And some people are just not comfortable with an online format. And I don't know about all of you, but being in Zoom meetings all day, it's sort of like, okay, I'm kind of done with that. I don't really want to go do an online auction now. But it might just be Zoom fatigue by this point. So, but I mean, it's really one of the only ways I think right now that we can have a kind of a fundraising event that supports the operating funds of the organization. So I'm trying to, you know, it's good to be supportive however we can of each other, and I think of various organizations. I was talking to the Boat Shop, which is down around the bend from us, and they do their auction in May, and they pivoted to an online auction using Octria. And we're actually quite happy with the results and felt that it was a good opportunity for them to not have to, well, let's see, how do you say it? Is that I spent a lot of times doing things for the auction in a really positive way that would have been spent cleaning up the boat shop just in order to have an in-person event. So, you know, there's always that. But I think, you know, I think this is an interesting time, and it certainly pushed a lot of us to try something new that we weren't going to do before. So I know we certainly learned a lot. The learning curve was high, but we managed to get over it. So
Hope that there's video of your little swim in the bay.
I don't know where it is. Yeah.
I might have to do a little digging. I will say you make such a good point, and it speaks back to Melanie's kind of their instinct to just push forward with your fundraiser when you knew folks were still kind of sitting at home. I definitely was more inclined to attend the kind of more programmatic aspects of fundraisers earlier in this COVID. I am still super inclined to participate in an auction because I think that the online auctions are so fun. And I agree with you. I have been to in-person fundraisers that have used those kind of platforms where you can bid from your phone, and it just ramps the whole thing up for me. I just get more carried away, and because, you know, you can see immediately when somebody outbids you. You don't have to walk across the room and check on it. You don't have to leave the bar or whatever. But yes, the last few fundraisers I've participated in, I've been much less inclined to actually sit in front of my screen for the program. So I don't know if that means maybe sort of like what Brianna and those folks did with the kind of sort of short videos spread out throughout the week on social media, if that's going to get more traction. I don't know.
Yeah, we did a couple of those. And I think certainly videos get a lot more click through on emails than anything else. So that was helpful. But I will also say that one unexpected benefit of doing the auction the way that we did, everybody had to pick up their stuff for the most part. There was one person in Florida that bid on something that we're mailing out, but she actually had grown up in Gig Harbor, so that was nice connection. But I love that we could kind of expand the reach of the event all across the country, basically. But also the aspect of having people come pick up their stuff in the following week has been really nice because we could actually thank people in person and just say, hey, this was really fun. What'd you think? And they're like, oh my God, it was crazy, but I loved it. Or I'll never do this again. Who knows? But it's just been nice to be able to thank them in person and say, oh my God, you're the person that got that, you know, because some people sign in with like names that you don't recognize, like L. And I'm like, who's that? It turns out we totally know this person. And so it was fun. But we also had some problems with registration. Some people had difficulty actually getting registered to bid. And we had to walk a couple of people, including a couple of our board members, through the process of actually getting registered so that they were set to bid. And I know that a lot of people would have given up long before that. So I don't know how many people we lost because they had challenges with registering. So
Yeah.
another thing.
Interesting. So Marianne was wondering sort of what other kind of fundraising platforms folks use. So if anyone who's in our audience wants to drop in the chat, whatever platform you use, I'd be curious too. I know Greater Giving is a common one, but there are also tons out there, and there are tons that are just kind of online auction platforms, and there's no end. I also just want to mention, I think Brianna actually has to leave us pretty quickly. So if anybody has questions, now is the time, or ideas or thoughts to share. I think we've seen some kind of different and unique models between the four museums. And it's just always interesting to hear what kind of has worked and what hasn't. I was asking Melanie before the call started if she were to hold her fundraiser today instead of April, is there anything that you'd do differently? I suppose you probably wouldn't need that like how to Zoom video necessarily, since folks pretty much have figured that out. Anybody else have any questions?
I mean, I think one thing just to note that I'm already thinking about is like, if we do this again next year, and I was just on a donor webinar today where they were talking about this, like we're kind of at the tail end of that emergency giving phase, because it usually lasts like 3 to 6 months, and the pandemic's going to last a lot longer. Maybe you guys disagree, but we're planning for it to last a lot longer. So that sense of urgency that I feel like we benefited from this year may not be there next year. And also the Zoom fatigue might be even worse, and people are not going to see it as a novelty. So I guess that's another thing we're trying to grapple with. It's just like, we might have to reinvent next year also. But, you know, I do think what I'm hearing from the other participants, because we were the only ones who didn't do an auction component or even a live event option, is that could really be something worth looking into, because even just having people register for your auction, like Marianne, I know one of our board members received an email from someone at the Poulsbo Historical Society saying, hey, you registered, but you haven't done anything yet. And it was kind of a nice, easy way to make a, you know, perfectly acceptable nudge. And I think it's nice to have a list of like people who want to participate, and then to see if they're not, you can make those follow-up connections.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And something else I thought of when Brianna, as you were just kind of imagining what this fundraiser might look like in another 6 months. I think initially organizations like ours were kind of assuming that giving would totally reorient towards kind of basic needs. You know, there were just the need was so great around housing and food insecurity and all of those things. And I feel like that caused a lot of organizations to kind of hold back initially on their ask. But ultimately, at least in this first 6 months, what I'm seeing and sensing is that heritage organizations like ours have been really pleasantly surprised by the giving that's happening, right? That people are still finding room to give to our organizations. But I wonder 6 months from now, I don't imagine that the economic impacts of this are going to go away as quickly as we would all like. And so when those basic needs are still feeling very emergent, what will that mean for our organizations? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we kind of, the whole thing's been just hard to anticipate and predict, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyone else want to share anything, or anybody on the call want to take yourself off mute and pop on and share an idea? I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
I will add one thing. We did do a t-shirt campaign as part of this, and I know some of you might be familiar with Bonfire, but I basically took our design and made these shirts that said History Rocks, because I knew I was going to need them for staff anyway. And so Bonfire allows you to just submit a design, pick your t-shirt styles and stuff, and set your prices, and then it'll also allow people to donate to the organization. And it's just kind of a nice way, because you don't have to put any money out. It's all based on how many shirts you sell, and then they drop ship directly to the buyer. And so it's just a really simple way. And we don't make a ton of money doing it, but we've made in the ballpark of $1,500, I think, all told, with some of the t-shirts. And if people want to support your organization, this can be a nice way to do that. So
I am a big fan of Bonfire. If you make a shirt on Bonfire, I will buy it. Honestly, the last 6 months, I have probably, my whole family is decked out in probably 30 t-shirts for all my favorite museums. And I love everybody so creative and has cute little sayings. And yeah, you might not bring in a ton of money, but you're also not, to talk about cost benefit, right? It's not a ton of effort or impact.
Yeah, well, for us to do a t-shirt design and carry it in our store is a lot of capital outlay. And you get maybe like one color and one design, but with Bonfire, people can pick and choose, a certain number of designs. And so it just works nicely. They've got a great business model, and they're very dependable. I had somebody get pink marks on a shirt, and they replaced it with no questions asked. So I would recommend them very much. Yeah.
Awesome.
I have a quick question for the group, and maybe it could be something they could email you, Allison, after. But as I'm thinking about coming up with a survey to send to the donors who donated to our Hats Off to History campaign, we've never done that before. So I was wondering if anyone has any surveys specifically around like asking donors what motivated them to give. I would love to see a couple of examples. It would help me not reinvent the wheel. And also, I'm happy to share those results once I send out the survey and get people's responses.
Yeah, that'd be great. If anybody, Melanie, or anybody has a survey or a sample or a template you could share, you can email that to me and I'll pass it on. And if you're comfortable with me sharing it with everybody, I'll do that, or I'll just send it to Brianna if you're more comfortable there. And that goes for anything else. If any of our folks who are on the line today, if you think of questions in a couple of hours or in a couple of days, or you come across a really great resource, like, for example, one thing I've been looking for is a kind of review, like a top 5 best online auction platforms, like reviews of them and a ranking of them. That doesn't exist. All I can find as far as reviews of online platforms are put out by the actual online platform companies as like self-promotion. So that's something I've been looking for, just to kind of, we're not allowed to, even though I just told you all how much I love Bonfire, we're officially not allowed to promote any single, company. But I'd love to just see a comparative kind of analysis of some of the more popular platforms. So if somebody comes across that, let me know. But yes, you all know how to find me, and I know how to find all of you and to share out information. So please stay in touch. Yes, and surveying. Yes, the evaluation is such an important piece, and I know you all know it. And it's so tricky because you can ask the same question 2 different ways and not get what you kind of want, not get the information that you're looking for. So, well, I'll just say thank you to Brianna and Melanie and Marianne and Steph and everybody who's out there in Zoom land with us today. I will be sending out an email probably tomorrow. It'll include some of the resources we talked about on Tuesday with our earthquake preparedness program, and then some of the links and resources we talked about here today. So I'm just going to mash those together in one kind of follow-up email. So if you don't care about earthquakes, you can ignore that part of the email. But probably going to be a little bit of radio silence from us for a few weeks as we gear up for the Pacific Northwest History Conference. And then I'm really looking forward to reconnecting with all of you probably in early November. So if you have ideas for programs, things you just want to know more about, or things you have questions about, or you're having trouble finding resources about any aspect of kind of keeping your heritage organization happy and healthy during these incredibly uncertain times, do let me know. I'm always looking for sort of common concerns, things that we can come together and share out a little bit about. So with that, I'll wish everybody a lovely afternoon, and I'll probably get this recording up later today or tomorrow. And thank you so much again. I always love seeing you all. Bye, everybody.